Hi everybody. I wanted to go ahead and address another set of questions. These are from Angeli, and she has asked, how can we deal with nighttime eating? And most of us have dealt with this concept of nighttime eating, which obviously it's outside of the boundaries of 0 and 5, or physical hunger and satisfaction. Oftentimes in the evening, we find ourselves drawn to the pantry or to the refrigerator, and there's all kinds of reasons why this might be the case, but I want to just define it for those of you that may be unfamiliar with this phenomenon. Are there any of you out there? Anyway, it can be while you're on the computer surfing the web, it can be while you have a TV show or a movie on, while you're reading a favorite book, while you're winding down. It can even be while you're cleaning up dinner and kind of tasting the leftovers, and which then might lead you, that's a salty taste, so then you go to the ice cream for a sweet taste, which can then launch you into an evening of salty sweet, salty sweet, salty sweet. Anyway, basically nighttime eating refers to this concept of eating outside of 0 and 5, usually after dinner, before bed, sometimes late night, oftentimes after the kids are in bed. So that's kind of what it is, in case you aren't familiar with it. Some of us, it's just little grazing. Others of us, it might be full-on binging. For some of us, it's anything in between and or all of it, depending upon what's going on in our lives. So that's kind of what nighttime eating, and I'm going to assume for the sake of our discussion that you know you're not hungry when you're doing it, and that's not just Angeli, but all of us. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about. Well, one of the things that I think is so important, Angeli, is to understand what is really going on. Why am I eating? And that's where dieting gets kind of a whole lot easier than this approach that we've embraced. When I was dieting, I didn't have to look at the why. I didn't have to look at the emotions, the underlying motivations for my eating. I could just say, this is what I'm supposed to do in order to be successful, and this, if I don't do this, I won't be successful. My allotted portion is this much, and if I go beyond that, I won't be successful. I didn't have to look at why, really. I just knew that I needed to do what the diet told me to. Okay, well, with the Thin Within approach, however, we really don't have those rigid guidelines, and I just have the sense that I'm drawn to food in the evening. So there are a number of things that could be going on here, and I just kind of want to address some of them, and hopefully I'll get to all of them. If not, because I want to keep this brief, briefer than the previous video, I may have to come back to it another time, but one of the things, and I mentioned this to Brianna in the other post about young moms, in the other blog post, and that is we may have to evaluate in this season of our life that we're in if there are some foods that we just shouldn't keep in the house. Again, all things are permissible, and we are free to eat, but the question is, not everything is beneficial. And so at certain times and certain seasons, perhaps I need to evaluate if I can handle the freedom of having any food available in my home. For me, like today, I was feeling a lot of emotion when I was coming back from an indoor tennis match that I had. It was raining outside. It was a wonderful day to be playing tennis inside, and rain is kind of one of my triggers for eating. And then my husband's out of town, there's been stuff going on, and I was going to pull by the supermarket on my way home, and I had a plan to get brownie mix, and I was going to get ice cream, and I thought I'll just go the gamut and get whipped cream and hot fudge sauce. And then I decided, you know what? If I have that stuff in my home, especially with the rain, he's going to be out of town, and I'm feeling emotional, I know I will eat way outside of my boundaries, and I probably won't stop. I was in a mode where I could tell, chances are I'd have a binge fest. And so I just chose not to go into the store and not bring those things home. Am I free to have those things home, here in my home? Absolutely. And often I do have those things in my home. Today is not a day for me to do that. So we have to be willing, and I had a plan for tonight's eating, let me tell you. That was my plan. It was going to be my evening eating. But I realized, that's not what I want. That's not going to serve my godly goals. So I'm going to be proactive and keep this stuff out of the house that I know I'll be tempted to eat without reservation. So I want to encourage you, ask God prayerfully if there are any foods that perhaps you need to keep out of your home for this season or this day even. Which snacks are you most likely, snack foods, are you more likely to grab whether you're hungry or not? Another thing that you might want to do is notice what is it that you do that causes you to grab for the food when you're not hungry. Most of us, there's a pattern, and we call that flesh machinery in Thin Within. It doesn't really matter what we call it, but it's like we turn on a video, out comes the popcorn. We sit by the computer, and out comes the, I don't know, Hershey Kisses. Whatever it might be, we have a mode. If this, then this. It's almost automatic. That's why it's called flesh machinery. What we might want to do is develop some new plans for the evening. So if I know that evening is a rough time for me, and I know that if I turn on a video, I'm going to want the food, I can do a couple things. One is don't do a video. Go out shopping, or go out visiting a friend, or I don't know, go for a walk in the neighborhood if the weather allows it, or play with the dog, or play with the kids, or anything that's different, that upsets, if you will, and I don't mean that negatively, but that kind of turns your routine, your nighttime eating routine, upside down and changes it, kind of shakes it up a little bit. If you can do that, that can sometimes help. Another possibility is if it is just about having something to do with your hands, then perhaps you can take up doing crewel work or embroidery or something while you're watching TV or whatever. Maybe that's all you need, or chewing sugarless gum if it's something that you need to do with your mouth. So there are things that you can try. Another thing some people do is they sip on tea or something else, because then they know they're not going to eat something, because eating doesn't go with that particular beverage or something. So if you have a combination that doesn't work, like if you sip on tea you will not eat, then sip on tea. And then, of course, bathe the whole evening in prayer. Ask God ahead of time. Be proactive. Another thing that I have done is if I know I'm going to have a rough time of it this evening, because everything is just sort of set up so that I will. I will probably have, because I have the freedom to do that, I don't have small children in my home anymore, or large children, or even a husband tonight in the home, I will probably take some time to have a praise fest. I'm going to sit down with my God list and add to it, and you'll see me talk about that elsewhere, or do a search here at the blog or at my other site, and you'll see what God list is and what a praise fest is. And I'll probably do that because it really helps me. It fills up my heart hunger, and then I'm not as likely to grab towards the food. I end up wanting to do the godly choice. I end up wanting to please the Lord instead of my flesh. The bottom line is, though, we have to. Do you hear me? You have to say no to your flesh. We have to say no to our flesh. We just have to. God has given us everything we need for life and godliness, and we just don't want to do it. We're rebels, and we need to take captive our thoughts, or we know full well our thoughts will take us captive. Okay? 2 Peter says he's given us everything that we need for life and godliness, and Titus chapter 2 tells us the same grace that brings us salvation also teaches us to say no to ungodliness. And for me, when I do the binge thing or overeating a lot, or even the graze thing in the evening, I'm being greedy. I want more food just because I want to indulge my fleshly nature. So we have to find a way to adhere to godly boundaries by just saying no to our flesh. Asking the Lord to strengthen us, getting on our face, taking time to turn on a praise and worship CD and just singing praises. That, I know that sounds really hokey for a lot of people, but the truth is, what I'm really hungry for is, I believe it's Him. The word says in Ecclesiastes that God has placed eternity in the hearts of man, and I believe that's a God-sized hole that only God can fill. We don't want to jam a square peg into a round hole, or a bunch of food into a God-shaped void. We want to allow God to flood that, and He will if we wait on Him to do it. So we've got to do something to change up our pattern in the evening. We've got to change the cues. If we usually stay home, go out. If we usually go out and eat, stay home. If we usually turn on a video and eat, read a book instead. If we usually eat when we read a book, surf the web instead, or pick up the vacuum and actually vacuum in the evening, or play with the kids, or roughhouse with the dogs, or dance to a praise tape. I mean, we can just do something out of the ordinary. What you might want to do after you're done with this video, or press stop right now and do it, is brainstorm what are some activities that I could actually do in the evening instead of what I usually do. And just generate a list. I would love to see what your list is like when you're done, and post it here in the comments. I bet other people could benefit from what you might come up with as you could from what they come up with. So we've got to do something to change the cues. Now, all of that is fine and dandy, but it's even better if we can begin to understand, okay, so what is really going on? Am I lonely? Am I rebellious? Am I bored? Am I agitated? What's going on that if I have that, especially when I'm struggling with weight and high blood pressure or diabetes or anything that is related to a weight struggle, why do I keep going back to the food when I know that's like a death sentence or certainly a poor health sentence to me? I want to take my question to God and ask Him, what is this about? Why do I keep doing this when I know it's not best for me? My heart of hearts, like that struggle in Romans chapter 7. The very good I want to do is not that which I do. It's the rotten stuff that I keep on doing. Oh, wretched man that I am. Oh, wretched woman that I am. Who will rescue me from this body of death? And then Paul goes on to say, but praise be to our God and Father, who does give us that victory. And then he goes on in Romans 8:1 to say, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ. So what I want to encourage you with as well, and this is already going on longer than I planned, is observe and correct. Remember that tool